Let's go to another video, but first subscribe and leave a like to strengthen the channel. Now, let's go.
She pulled the car over onto the shoulder and got out without looking back. The baby was in the back seat, wrapped in a worn blue blanket, with wide eyes and arms stretched out toward her, as if he knew what was happening, as if he were begging her not to do that. She closed the door, walked around, got into the driver's seat, and accelerated. The sound he made in that moment, a low, almost human whimper, was the last thing she heard before silence swallowed everything. Her name was Ira, 38 years old, trained as a veterinarian, a volunteer caretaker at a primate sanctuary in the countryside. For 4 months, she had been the only maternal figure Kibbo knew. She was the one who fed him in the middle of the night, who warmed his hands on cold nights, who slept by his side when he cried for no apparent reason. But on that day, something inside her had broken. A phone call, news she wasn't expecting, and the anger that came afterward had no clear target, so it found the easiest path. She drove for 40 minutes without thinking. The rural road was empty, the sky heavy. When the rain began to fall, she barely noticed. She only noticed when the front wheels lost contact with the asphalt. The concrete barrier on the side of the bridge wasn't high. The car went through it, as if it were paper. The fall lasted less than 2 seconds. The impact with the water was violent enough to shatter the windshield and knock her unconscious for a moment. When she came to, the water was already at the level of the steering wheel. The door wouldn't open. The power window didn't respond. She screamed, but there was no one to hear. No one, except Kibbo. The baby had gotten out of the blanket as soon as the car stopped. He had gone down to the side of the road, looked at the darkness around him, and stood still for a few seconds, as if he were deciding something. Then he started to run. No one knows for sure how long he ran. No one knows how he chose the right direction. But something in him knew where to go. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let me know in the comments what you think and which country you're watching from. Kibbo had never left the sanctuary alone. Everything he knew was fences, low trees, and the familiar scent of Ira. Outside of that, the world was noise, wet asphalt, and headlights slicing through the fog like knives. But he ran, with his hands touching the ground at every stride, his soaked fur clinging to his small body. He ran as if something inside him was burning, as if stopping meant losing something that could never be recovered. The rural road that led to the bridge was almost 3 kilometers from where Ira had pulled over the car. No camera recorded his path. No witness saw a baby gorilla crossing the rain that night. What is known is that, at 9:47 p.m., the guard Renato Figueroa was alone in the forest control post cabin when he heard something hit the metal door. He opened it expecting to find a lost dog. Kibbo was standing at the threshold, panting, his eyes fixed on him. He didn't scream. He didn't act aggressively. He simply turned his body, took a few steps toward the road, and looked back, once, twice, 3 times, until Renato understood that he needed to follow. Inside the submerged car, Ira had stopped screaming, not out of surrender, but because the water was already at her chin, and every inch of air left was too precious to waste on cries no one could hear. She held onto the roof with both hands, her head tilted upward, breathing the last pocket of oxygen that physics still allowed. Her thoughts no longer formed complete sentences. They came in fragments: her mother's face, the smell of coffee, the blue blanket she had left on the back seat. She didn't think about Kibbo. She was absolutely certain he was lost in the middle of the road, frightened, with no one. Renato called for rescue while following the baby on foot along the muddy roadside. At first, the operator on the other end doubted it. A gorilla guiding a forest guard to an accident? He asked for confirmation twice. Renato didn't have time to convince anyone. He hung up and kept walking. When they reached the edge of the bridge, the beam of Renato's flashlight illuminated the dark, restless surface of the river. There were bubbles rising. There was the reflection of metal just beneath the water. There was someone still alive inside, but for exactly how long, no one around could calculate. The rescue team arrived in 11 minutes. It felt like 11 hours. Renato stayed at the edge of the bridge with Kibbo while the divers hurriedly prepared. The baby didn't move a single step away from the rusty iron railing. He kept his hands closed around the bar, his eyes fixed on the dark water, completely still, as if he knew that any movement on his part could change what was about to happen down there. Renato tried to move him away once. Kibbo didn't budge. The first diver went down at 10:03 p.m. The current was weak, but visibility was almost zero. He had diving lights attached to his helmet, and even so, the car only appeared when he was less than a meter away. Dark sedan, for doors, tilted toward the driver's side. He knocked on the window twice. There was no immediate response. Then a hand touched the glass from the inside. Aira was conscious. Her mouth was pressed against the last 5 centimeters of air left at the top of the car. When she felt the vibration of the knocks, she slowly opened her eyes and saw the beam of light outside. She didn't cry. There were no tears possible at that moment. Only the instinct not to open her mouth, not to waste air, to hold on for one more second, and then another, and then another. The diver signaled upward. The second one went down with cutting equipment. The rear window gave way in 40 seconds. On the bridge, Kibbo began to move before anyone present realized what was happening below. He let go of the railing, turned his body, and stood looking at the river with a different kind of attention, no longer tense, but waiting, as if he somehow felt that the hardest part was over. Aira emerged at 10:09 p.m., 22 minutes submerged. The paramedics received her at the riverbank, covered her body with a thermal blanket. She coughed up water and trembled uncontrollably, but she was breathing. She was awake. Her eyes scanned the scene around her. Lights, uniforms, the sound of the river, until they stopped on something at the top of the bridge. A small, dark figure, standing by the railing. She didn't understand immediately. Her brain was still slowly reorganizing what was real, separating what had been a dream from what had been cold water.
I have my opinion on this story, but I want to know yours. Leave a comment telling us what you think, and don't forget to subscribe so we can continue this conversation in future videos. Where are you watching from? I want to see who lives the furthest away.
But her heart understood first. Renato came down, carrying Kibbo in his arms. The baby was heavy for his size, dense, warm, his muscles still tense, as if his body hadn't received the message that the danger had passed. When they reached the riverbank, the paramedics instinctively stepped back. No one had been informed there was a gorilla at the scene. No one quite knew what to do. Kibbo didn't wait for them to decide. He slipped out of Renato's arms, placed his feet in the mud, and walked toward the thermal blanket where Aira was lying. Slowly, unhurried, as if each step were a deliberate choice. One of the paramedics moved to intercept him. Renato grabbed his arm. "Let him," he said. Just that. Kibbo stopped less than half a meter from her. Aira saw him up close for the first time since the abandonment. His soaked fur, his wide hands resting on the mud, his brown eyes fixed on her with an expression that no scientific training can precisely name, but that anyone who has ever been looked at like that by an animal recognizes without hesitation. She opened her mouth. No sound came out. Kibbo took the final step and rested his forehead against her shoulder. It was that gesture, simple, silent, without any demand, that broke something inside Aira that had remained intact the entire time she was submerged. She cried. She cried in a way the paramedics around had never seen at a rescue scene. Not from relief, not from pain, but from something that has no clear name, that lies somewhere between shame and gratitude and the astonishment of being saved by someone you had abandoned. She wrapped her arms around him carefully, with a gentleness that seemed to come from a very old place, as if she were afraid he might leave if she held too tightly. He didn't. They stayed like that for a length of time no one measured. The rain had stopped. The river continued its course with complete indifference. The ambulance lights rotated silently over the scene, and no one there. Not the paramedics, not Renato, not the divers who had just come out of the water, felt any urge to rush that moment. Some years later, Renato still said it was the strangest and most beautiful thing he had seen in 20 years of service. That night, he simply stood still and let it happen. Aira was hospitalized for 3 days. Nothing serious. Mild hypothermia, a few abrasions, a cut on her scalp that required 4 stitches. The doctor said she had been lucky. She didn't respond. She kept staring at the ceiling, thinking that luck wasn't exactly the right word for what had happened. Kibbo stayed under Renato's temporary care while the sanctuary arranged transportation. The guard had never taken care of a primate. He learned in 2 hours that a baby gorilla doesn't like being alone, doesn't tolerate loud noise, and sleeps better when it has something soft to hold. Renato slept that night with the baby wrapped in his winter coat, the 2 of them in the back seat of the pickup truck. He never told many people about that, but he never forgot it either. On the 3rd day, before being discharged, Aira asked to see Kibbo. The doctors hesitated. The sanctuary coordinator, a man named Dario, brought the baby personally. When Kibbo entered the room and found the familiar scent, he went straight into her arms without ceremony, as if the time apart had never existed, as if his body simply held no resentment. Aira stayed silent for a long moment. Then she said, softly, her voice still hoarse, "I don't deserve this." Dario replied without thinking, "He doesn't agree." She returned to the sanctuary 2 weeks later, not as a visitor, as a caretaker, with her contract renewed and an expanded role. The story had circulated among the staff, and no one asked anything directly. There was no need. Some things are understood through the silence of those who live them. Kibbo grew. He became large, strong, with that presence adult gorillas carry, as if the air around them weighed differently. Aira followed every stage. She was there when he learned to open enrichment boxes, when he began to interact with the others in the group, when he stopped needing her to sleep. She never abandoned another animal, not because she made a promise, but because some experiences change what a person is on the inside. Not what they decide to be, but what they become without realizing it. The river kept flowing as usual. The bridge was repaired. The blue blanket was never found. But Kibbo stayed, and that was enough. If this story touched you, leave your comment below, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share which city or country you're watching from.